Thank you, Anne, for hosting us and the JH-AITC team. Wonderful to be on. My name is Zonooz, CEO and co-founder of NimbleMind.ai. We're a data and AI platform for healthcare providers and institutions. We're thrilled to be speaking to this group here. We are going to run through a couple different items today on the agenda. We'll go through founder intros. We'll talk about the context and the problem space that we're building in. We're a product company, so we'll talk about our product, how we built it, why we built it, and where we hope to go. We'll talk about the user experience of how we're envisioning the AI systems that we've developed and how they're going to work and how they are working for our customers in their particular clinical context and administrative context. We'll go through our roadmap, and then we've left plenty of time for Q&A. Which we will address at the end. So if you guys have any questions that pop up, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A section of Zoom. Navin and myself will address those at the end. So let's dive in. I'll start with intro. So my name is Zonooz. As I mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of NimbleMind, along with Navin, our Chief AI Officer. My background very quickly started out in engineering. I did my undergrad and graduate work in nuclear plasma and radiological engineering. I was a product development lead at a couple different startups, mostly in the defense tech space, working for DoD, Army, Navy, etc. I then decided to switch gears, spent the next 10 years of my life working in traditional tech or IT tech. I did consulting for a little bit and then spent the majority of that 10 years at Amazon Web Services. AWS, as it's otherwise known, is the cloud division of Amazon. We, had a chance to really build a great business across a number of different services. I think at last count there are something like 200 different products. I had a hand in designing, developing, launching over 40 of those services, including AWS Data Marketplace for healthcare. I did the first Epic deployment on cloud, which was on AWS with Piedmont Health. And I did a ton of work with Alexa in the development of Alexa for healthcare, which we got to deploy a couple really kind of forward-thinking healthcare institutions across the world. After AWS, I did a stint at Stripe, which is a fintech company based out of San Francisco. And then I left about 2 years ago to start NimbleMind. This is my fourth startup. Navin and I met kind of maybe 2.5 years ago through YC or Y Combinator, and it was kind of a match made in heaven. We can talk about our experience in meeting each other and how this business came about. As I understand it, the audience today comprises kind of several different personas. I think there's some entrepreneurs out there, some engineers and builders, some clinicians. We've kind of prepared for all those personas, so please feel free to post any questions related to kind of our business and founding journey. We're happy to share some thoughts there on like best practices. We're prepared to talk about engineering challenges and just how to scale a technology company in healthcare. We just finished our raise about 3 months ago. So if there's any folks out there who are fundraising, we're happy to be a sounding board to those folks. And last and definitely most importantly, if there's any clinicians or builders out there who are dealing with the problem that we address, we'd love to talk to you. So we'll give you more context as the call continues, but let me turn it over to Navin for their introduction. Navin?
Hi, thanks for taking the time, everyone, to join us. So I'm Navin, co-founder at NimbleMind, Chief AI Officer. So did a PhD some years ago at Yale with Nicholas Christakis, who used to work with palliative care, but now I think is more a health AI person. Raised a bunch of funding there and started my own lab. Published about 60 papers, about $1 million of funding. Primarily, I worked on very similar problems that we'll talk about today, essentially using data from a range of disparate sources like wearables and EMR to predict health outcomes like movement of smoking into vaping, retention in methadone treatment, and so on. Then went to New York City Health and Hospitals as head of data science. Very similar work there. Led a bunch of projects across a 11-site hospital system, where we looked at predicting whether people use audio or video for Medicaid based PCP calls and treatment dropout, and also had the honor of working on the country's largest AI-led teleretinal screening program. So yeah, happy to see how we can, use some of the things we've learned and make healthcare a little bit better.
Excellent. We also have two fantastic advisors on the team. These are industry luminaries and leaders. Leslie Solomon, who I had the opportunity to work with when I was at AWS. She was the Chief Innovation Officer at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute at that time. Leslie's been with us pretty much since inception, along with Zane Kandarian, who's a practicing doctor. He's now an executive vice president, partner, and COO at a healthcare-focused PE group based out of the Middle East. They do tons of projects and work across many different sites and systems across North America, Europe, and the Middle East. This is kind of the executive leadership team. We have tons of other smart folks working with us and alongside us, either on product side or research or market, that are not presented here, but these are kind of the main cast of characters, if you will. So what are we building? Why are we building it? And why is this important? So I think it goes without saying that probably everyone on this call almost certainly believes the statement, which is AI is going to transform healthcare, full stop. Right? I don't think there's a single part of the healthcare value chain that cannot be radically transformed by some sort of AI-driven system, whether that's an agent or some sort of like inference system, or maybe a clinical decision support model. There's really no corner of healthcare that cannot be transformed by some AI system. Originally, Navin and I set out to build one or several of these AI agents or systems. And what we quickly learned is there's a fundamental problem blocker in actually building these models. We'll get to kind of what we learned in a sec. But if you actually look at now, maybe the end of a effort to build those AI models, right? Let's look retrospectively. What Navin and I noticed is that there's really kind of one class of models that stand out as far as their impact on healthcare, their uptake and usage, and how they're actually driving efficiency across the system. And these are lightweight, specialty-specific models. So kind of hot take for us, but I think this is borne out by the evidence. LLMs aren't the path forward in a lot of senses. They're inconsistent, they're not reproducible, they're very hard to peer review, they're constantly evolving. Only a few institutions, right? We're talking about the OpenAIs and the Anthropics of the world can afford to build these foundational models. They're not really meaningfully getting used in clinical decisions or in high quality administrative or financial decisions. Instead, what we see, and this is borne out by 100 plus kind of interviews and meetings that Navin and I had with 100 different institutions. The path forward, we think, are these lightweight, specialty specific models. So, what does this mean? A smaller domain space, smaller set of problems and data spaces driven into a pipeline that's organizing, curating, and making that data available to a small set of AI predictive models that people are building. I think sepsis is probably the greatest example of this. What we see developing are dozens, if not hundreds, of other models similar in scope and scale and accuracy to sepsis across every other specialty. And so this is the future that we think kind of everyone's eventually going to skate towards, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. And every single one of these efforts is dealing with the same problem, which is they have a bunch of raw, disorganized clinical data on one side. They need to ingest it, kind of curate it, organize it, and turn it into what's called a corpus on the other side. We call this problem or this process a data augmentation pipeline. That pipeline generates data that's useful to an AI builder who's trying to build some type of model that makes some sort of predictive outcome or inference within that given specialty space, like geriatrics. So what we're building is something that kind of tackles these three principal blockers in AI development. How do you take data that is disorganized and distributed across a bunch of different locations within the institution, right? A lot of data lives within the electronic medical records, like an Epic or a Cerner. A lot of it lives in imaging and like PAC systems. And there's several other CIS systems that house this type of data. Institutions have data lakes potentially. We've spoken to a lot of folks that have deployed some kind of early iteration of an enterprise data lake, but it's sitting there, it's not organized, it's not curated for one particular model building task. The second major hurdle is that if you are able to get to that data and integrate and pull that data somewhere, Now you have the second problem, which is it lacks curation and annotation, right? So that data needs to be organized, structured, and then labeled and annotated in a way that's actually useful to an AI training job, right? For any AI builders or trainers on the call, you guys know that you cannot build an accurate model without a high fidelity, organized, and structured data set to actually train that model and make it efficient and good at what you want it to do. And then the final challenge that we found is that, okay, let's say you do the first two tasks. Now you have this third challenge, which is you're sitting on a very useful data set. These things are rarely built alone. How do you effectively, securely, and in a compliant way share that data with other collaborators? They might be inside your institution or they might sit outside the institution, right? Maybe you're collaborating with some sister organization or some vendor or AI research agency that sits outside the org. How do you make that data available so that you're basically getting the best of the community towards the one goal of building, again, whatever model it is you're building? We set out to solve all three of these problems. So what NimbleMind does is we solve that ingestion problem. We integrate to and ingest data from many different sources. We merge and cleanse that data. Once in our kind of data storage vehicle or repository, we do labeling and curation tasks. We don't do everything, but we automate a lot. And the goal here is to reduce the burden on data scientists and clinicians who are doing these tasks manually. We'll talk about kind of the value proposition for how we kind of basically solve this problem for these builders. And then finally, once that data is labeled and curated and stored, we allow the collaboration and dissemination of that data in a secure and compliant manner that maintains patient privacy, that maintains kind of and meets HIPAA regulations. All right. So kind of restating just our reason for being, we think there's this fundamental problem that needs to be solved first before we get to do all the really cool AI stuff in healthcare, which is making all the vast amounts of multimodal clinical data that institutions are sitting on available and ready for downstream AI training uses. That's what NimbleMind was trying to do. So we built software that essentially enables this kind of mission and this kind of goal for transformation within healthcare. As I understand it, right, most of the folks on this call, given it's the AITC, are focused on geriatrics, so we decided to kind of tailor make this to this audience here. So what is the problem space within geriatrics? We've already done some work in this space, so this may be useful for folks on the call. There's a ton of different data types that are relevant to building and training models in geriatrics, right? You may be pulling and leveraging data from the EMR. You may have patients who are wearing wearables or remote monitoring devices. There's plenty of imaging data and biomarker data. Each of these data types have their own modality, right? It's a different file type that requires its own different type of transformation, normalization, harmonization. We ingest and organize all these data types and basically make them available in a scalable, automated, and quick fashion to someone who wants to build an AI model downstream. So to kind of double click on what those tasks actually are and what we automate, let me turn it over to Navin, who's done this work themselves for years manually and is now driving forward our AI capabilities to automate this. Navin, over to you.
So a lot of these processes currently are done, as Pai said, like pretty manually. So for example, you have, people are organizing data across various EMR systems, deduplicating them, harmonizing them. And then, after all these tedious and time-consuming tasks are done, like you go over to the model and training optimization side, right? Where you do all of these things like sequentially, but, with a lot of manual effort, even though some of the tools are fairly automated. There's a lot of chance for error and also a lot of wastage and duplication of efforts. So the goal overall here is to try and free up data scientists' time and make the whole process seamless. And I think more importantly, error free and much quicker, right? So even when I was in New York City Health and Hospitals, we encountered like these scenarios like repeatedly where we would organize data across multiple sites, deep duplicate patient records based on MRN numbers and so on. And like then after that, find out that there was another team doing like roughly the same thing. So where we trying to go and where are we here now, right? Where are we now? So that leads us to the next slide. Essentially, with a much smaller list. So our goal is to sort of unify the data curation element and the model training and optimization and make it far more seamless, error-free, and essentially to make data scientists' lives far easier, right? So instead of these range of variegated tasks, the goal is to have a scenario where all the data is in one single place, unified, where there are a bunch of AI agents that help with these processes, and also through reinforcement learning, actually ping the clinicians or data scientists to improve the whole process as they go forward. So I'm going to give an overview of the kinds of agents that we use in these processes, and I'm going to divide them in terms of sort of the subject area that they sort of focus around. And you can think of these as sort of different elements that a data scientist would normally do, and they're now being composed into agents. So first we have the ingestion and data understanding sort of group of agents where the goal is to essentially understand what kind of data is being provided and to detect it, classify it, and then match it to a particular kind of modality, be it image, EMR, or so on. Then you have ones which are in charge of enrichment, which take the data from the ingestion agents and then match it to the models that are available. So essentially saying if data X comes in, what kind of enrichments can you provide, right? Based on what you have given. Then after that, you need to align these insights with clinical context, with explainability and labeling edge cases for clinicians to then improve the model. So that comes under clinical context and governance. And then towards the end, you have multimodal integration. So the goal here is to have an agent which looks at different sources of data that come in and then figure out a way to combine them for more accurate and more importantly, more useful predictions. Then finally, you have a set of agents that monitor feedback. These can be open-ended and also um, decide what are the best ways to get the data out of the system, be it directly into an EMR or in some sort of flat file, maybe even into a PACS or PACS server. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the specific agents and how we're using them currently. So ingestion agents have a very expensive job. Their goal is to figure out what kind of data is coming in. Is it EMR data? Is it image data, and so on? And this is done through some proprietary techniques we have developed in regard to vision language models. And the goal is to identify what the various features are in the data, and then pass them on to the second agent, which is the feasibility tracker agent. So this agent checks all the fields that are in the data, and then cross-references with the list of models in the garden, like fall risk prediction or pre-diabetic risk and so on, and then says, oh, these are the models that you can use given the data you have. Then the label reviewer post-inference looks at what are the potential edge cases, essentially trying to find out are there issues with the inferences and can these be feedback to the clinician to improve the overall efficacy of the model. Then you have the model architecture selector, which recommends the kinds of models that will be used and also the rationale, right? So explaining to the clinician or data scientist, oh, we picked this because you have provided image data and like given you have image data, these are the best kinds of models and so on. Finally, I think the most important is how we strengthen our AI tooling is through enrichment feedback. So as I said before, this can be through labeling edge cases, but at the same time also like open-ended feedback where um, data scientists or other users would type in what they feel, and then this would be archived and simplified so the models can then take this information and then reinforce their own processes.
Excellent. Thanks, Navin. So, just very quickly again for the entrepreneurs out there, kind of who are we focused on? Who are we building for? Right, some of the business stuff around the technical kind of approach that Navin just walked us through. We think there's a big gap right now in the marketplace as far as vendors building AI tooling for providers. That's who we're focused on. In my experience and in the work that I've done both at AWS and Stripe over the last 10 years, I think counterparties to providers, aka payers and pharma, has unfortunately far more advanced both data science and AI tooling to drive their business goals, whether it's the development and research side for pharma, or whether it's managing risk and determining kind of patient payer profiles on the insurance side. What we think is there's an opening to build a provider-centric data tool that makes use of clinical data for who is ultimately the best steward of clinical data, which is the provider, and to drive efficacy, leverage, and outcomes for not just only the patients, but for the provider organization itself. That's who we're focused on. We're taking this lightweight Gen AI model approach. We have a number of different models that we built internally. We're focused on domain-specific models. That's the highest level of performance that we've seen across a number of different contexts. We think this is the way to win in the marketplace and to build tools that clinicians will actually feel comfortable depending on, and has very little risk of hallucination. We're making data more useful for a whole host of consumers, right? They could be AI builders within the institution. They could be ecosystem partners that institutions have decided to work with, right? Like consultancies or other vendors. We ultimately want to make that data as useful to any number of consumers downstream that the provider decides they want to work with. We don't feel like it's our place to say who can use and access that data. We think the providers are the ones in the driver's seat who are best positioned to make that decision. We want to be the tool that helps them execute their own data strategy. And kind of we encapsulate that with this saying at NimbleMind, which is we want data freedom for the providers. That's who we're serving. That's the vision that we're driving towards. What are the benefits, right? We control and maintain data provenance, so you can track kind of where data's come from, how it's been transformed, and what's kind of happened to it over time, right? We think data lineage is very important when working in a space like this. We archive, centralize, and document every change that happens to that data, so the institutions can have high fidelity and tracking how that data is getting used and built upon across a number of different efforts. We increase discoverability. One of these principal problems that it's really unfortunate, but we've seen this now dozens of times across large institutions that we talk to, is you have multiple teams kind of working on the same problem within the same organization. And so you're duplicating, the effort, right? You as a leader are basically paying twice, or maybe in certain cases, three times for generating some data output. And the quality is probably 50% of what it could be because, the right hand is not talking to the left hand. And finally, we support IRB visibility and processes. So we have controls built into place and workflows that allow the institutional review board to, have visibility to how data is actually getting used. We think this is the right way to do it because now we give them the tools to actually enable data access and potentially revoke it, right, when the project's done. And so we think we're kind of like rebalancing this risk profile that unfortunately a lot of IRB teams are dealing with, which is when they approve something, they have no ability to maybe monitor or discern how that project is progressing, what the data uses are. And so they're being a lot more timid than maybe ideally we should be. Onboarding for us is fairly quick. We do a quick data assessment. We figure out what modalities of data the host institution is working with. We work in concert with the client team to determine the curation and enrichment needs. These are kind of the two classes of data transformation that we do. That whole process typically takes anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. And then we actually start getting to work. So we'll propose a data transformation process. We'll actually implement a kind of pipeline or an augmentation pipeline. And that takes anywhere between another 4 to 8 weeks. We're pretty early in our journey. We have 4 contracts under our belt. The way we're building this is to be software and automated, but we want to make sure every single one of our customers has a very positive journey when they're onboarding and using NimbleMind. So what does this actually look like to a user? These are actual screenshots that we've taken from the platform. If anyone's interested in kind of learning more, potentially using NimbleMind, we're happy to have a follow-on call with anyone. I'll put my email at the end. But we've just taken a couple of screenshots of the platform so folks can see kind of how this would look. So first and foremost, there's an enterprise-grade security login, and we have kind of different roles. The goal for us is to serve an institution. So there's some type of like lead administrator. This is typically someone in the chief data officer's uh, remit, or maybe within health IT or CIO's office. There's different specialty heads that maintain and build data sets within their remit or within their department. And then finally, at the lowest level, there's clinicians or data users that are actually pulling together these data sets and working with them. We have this construct that we call a data room, right? That's where all the data lives. That's where collaborators can get access to one specific corpus or one kind of annotated and organized data set. The UX process is really easy. You just click create new data room and you drag and drop multimodal data into that data room. You select which kind of augmentations or enrichments you'd like, and we pretty much handle the rest. You as a user can kind of deep dive into the annotations and transformations we've made through this thing that we call patient cards. So you can actually explore and interrogate each of those annotations and figure out if we were accurate or not. We have our own kind of confidence scoring that we do, and we'll highlight low confidence and transformations to the user so that we can get some reinforcement learning through human feedback and not only correct that incorrect or low confidence transformation, but to also train the model to do that. We have many different specialties that we support with more on the way. Here you can see chest x-rays and different modalities that we support. We're doing some work in gastro as well, so endoscopy and colonoscopy is something that we work with. And there's many other modalities that we're not presenting here that we work with. Kind of what's coming for us down the pipe. We're live in palliative care. We have active testing and betas going on in gastro, in endocrinology, and geriatrics with several different model types that Navin and their teams are building, and actively testing with a number of design partners. So in closing, and I think we're right on the mark with 30 minutes, just kind of as like a call to action. If anyone in the audience works for an organization that has data curation needs, we'd love to talk to you. If you are someone that's working with data on a day-to-day basis and is doing this work manually, we're actively testing version 2 of our UX. We're really excited about that. We just kicked off that process about 2 weeks ago. I think we've already spoken to about a half dozen folks. We'd love to talk to you if you're just open to giving feedback. Navin and I do not get offended when our baby is called ugly. In fact, we encourage it, we seek it out. So if anyone's interested in just kind of providing us feedback on what the kind of next iteration of Nimble Mind should look like, we're interested in talking to you. And then if you're anyone that deals with kind of data curation and transformation problems, please reach out. We'd love to get to know you and understand your problem a little bit more, and potentially there's some learnings we can take back to the product and team. So I appreciate the time. We intentionally kind of made this 30 minutes so we could get to questions, and I see there's already a few posted. So maybe we'll start with Bill Koslowski. How do you feel about patients using healthcare AI agents to support diagnosis and disease management in concert with their physicians? With development tools such as Replit, non-coding AI agents can be created and deployed quite easily. I created a blood pressure tracker yesterday. Are you embracing such grassroots innovation? Yeah, great question, Bill. I'll give you my take. Navin, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. But I think agents are the future across a number of different use cases. Who we're building for are institutions, right? At the end of the day, I think every single piece of technology that we build for healthcare has to serve to drive and support patient and clinician interaction. That's my view. I think that's high trust. I think that's what people are actually yearning for, is more kind of human to human interaction. And I think the technology should be as invisible and as supportive of that interaction model as possible. That's Nimble Mind's aim. And that's certainly where we're headed. Now, that isn't to say that's the only answer. I do think healthcare has maybe not benefited as much as other industries as when it comes to experimenting and testing. If I look at kind of my home industry of tech, there are tons of failures and experiments being run every day, and I think that benefits the industry as a whole. Um, I do think it is prudent and necessary for folks to constantly kind of push at boundaries in healthcare and see what works. Would I personally trust an AI agent to serve the patient directly? Maybe not, but I might be wrong. And so, Bill, I think my reaction to your question is Nibblemind doesn't do it, but I don't see any reason why others can't experiment, kind of see if there's some value created and some efficiencies gained and some better patient outcomes delivered as a result of that type of work. Navin, anything to add on that?
I think part of what Bill is talking about, in some sense, relates to our major problem, right? It's sort of democratizing healthcare. So these kinds of AI agents that, I mean, I'm not sure whether I would call it grassroots innovation per se, because I think that creates a distinction between experts and non-experts. But eventually, all of these products that, if they are validated, could potentially sit on our agent garden, right? So even if you are a small clinical practice and you see this particular agent that Bill or their partners have developed, that can be potentially used. So we have like no problem with including these kinds of products on our platform eventually, and it's no different from even like large companies like Google or whatever, because in their model garden they also have models that are created by like much smaller entities like Hugging Face and things like that. Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. And I'm reading these questions out loud because I know this is being recorded and it's going to get posted. I'm not sure if the viewers of that video will see the questions. So apologies to everyone on the call, but I'm going to read these just for um, posterity's sake. So, question from Nabil Adam. I wonder what are some of the sources of these data you mentioned? Nabil, the goal is to ingest data from every CIS system eventually. At the moment, we ingest from EMRs. So think like structured and unstructured data, like clinicians' notes is unstructured, but there's a ton of other structured data that we pull from EMRs. Imaging from PACS systems, waveform information, wearables data. Those data sets may sit within the CIS systems directly, or like in the case of wearables, it might sit on Fitbit servers. We also ingest from like data lakes. So that's not a fully exhaustive list yet. We're working on building integrations and the ability to pull data from eventually every single relevant source of healthcare data that an institution may have. But those are some examples of what we're working with today. Okay, here we go. From Cheryl, can you do anything about the high error rate in EHR patient notes? A conservative estimate is an average of 7 errors per page. That's an interesting one. So a couple of things of what we do and what we don't do. So the data that's in a clinician's note, highly valuable, context specific. The nomenclature is oftentimes not standardized. There are human errors. What we do is we take that data and we transform it into like, kind of think of like a tabular form, right? So turning it into something structured that's explorable and usable downstream. There are some transformations that we do and some entity extraction and identification. I suppose it would depend on the type of errors that we encounter and how we would correct those. I know we have some approaches to doing this today, but Navin, I don't know if there's any more detail you want to
Yeah.
provide on the
So I
technical
think,
side with this.
yeah, thanks, Cheryl, for the question. So much like what Bill was saying, like these kinds of, I would say, agents like that correct. So there's two ways to think about this, right? I mean, two sort of answers here. One is that yes, potentially these sorts of agents would exist to flag EHR errors and also maybe make changes as needed, and that potentially would sit on our agent platform. And we have some existing agents that do that. And another is that um, the errors are also in some sense useful for the agent, and that touches on like our broader point around RLHF, right? Which is the errors that are found in the system will be indicated by the clinician or data scientist, and that will actually improve the performance of the system. So I suppose a shorter answer to your question is that yes, these problems that you're facing now will get addressed and are currently being addressed by some facets of our platform.
Awesome. Sure. I see we put a couple other messages in here. I'd be open to chatting with you. If you want to send me an email, I should be on the screen. Happy to talk more about with our experience with Accelerated and just kind of the problem space you're building. Okay, so anonymous attendee, for the developer, what languages are you supporting for apps? Uh, Maybe utilizing the data and training local models. That's a great question. So we are developing and have kind of like the early innings of our API integrations built out. So we have documentation on that. Uh, the data that we output is in a number of different formats. It's obviously relevant to the modality of data that we're working with. Um, and then the languages that we support, I guess, really could be any language. Our goal is like the way we think about our product and what we do is we're the first link in a longer chain of events that go between unstructured multimodal clinical data and a finished model on one side. So our goal is to make that link actually usable and tied into the next link down the chain. So when you use us and that data gets transformed into some sort of useful format, we got to pass it off downstream. So we have APIs that you could tag into. You can export the data through like a flat file. In certain cases, we can actually upload that data to some sort of like cloud repository. And we're working on more kind of output um, targets, if you will, that we'll be releasing soon. Any language could be used on that data, right? Obviously, Python and like, you know, Jupyter notebooks or whatever environment you build in. I think there's a couple kind of popular standardized ones out there. Um, as long as you can upload or ingest data from sources that are kind of in the mainstream, you should be able to work with us. All right, another question from an anonymous attendee.
So broadly, the question here is like, yeah, can you gather intake social workers data? And that leads to a broader point, right? Essentially, our platform is robust to any kind of data, be it like clinical notes, even like as that we covered earlier, like home care evals, patient self-report, and even in fact, for one of our current contracts, we are intaking, like methadone doses and completion of treatment and that sort of thing. So yes, I think not just social worker data, but almost anything we can integrate. And then I think that also leads to Adam's question after that. I can take that also. So Adam's question is, does your platform integrate voice and conversational behavior and vocal biomarker modalities and any integration of SDOH, social determinants of health? So yes, similar to the previous question, we do have capabilities to integrate voice, conversational behavior, vocal biomarkers. And in fact, we have done work in this area before in the realm of depression prediction. SDOH comes up a lot. In fact, errors with SDOH are pretty common, and that's something we are currently looking into with some clinician partners. There's a high error rate, as you know, when clinicians input like various forms of SDOH into the platform, and that's something we are looking at fixing. So that's actually a big factor in the kinds of data that we input. So the short answer to all of these three questions is yes. Basically, our agent at this point is robust to various forms of tabular data. I can intake that, but the goal is any kind of data you throw at the agent, it will understand what it is and be able to tell the subsequent agents how to deal with that kind of data. So I think
Uh,
yeah, go ahead, Pai.
yeah, I think the next one is from Cheryl again. NIH has a request for comment on a NOSI to build AI doctors, although it was described differently. Any thoughts or comments? Um, I'm not familiar with that specific um, request from NIH, but kind of going back to my earlier comment, I think it depends on how you define AI doctor. Um, I don't think anyone is out to replace clinicians. In fact, I think we need more of them. I think that's well documented. There's a huge shortage of trained, reputable, intelligent, capable clinicians. Like we need more of them in this country, and I think globally as well. Um, so I think the aim for us as technologists is to build tools that serve them, serve the patients, and make their lives easier, right? I think burnout's a huge issue. Every single system that we talk to is focused on that as like a major KPI that they're tracking. I think technology is the lever to make them more productive, allow them to focus more time on like direct patient interactions, and to help them make more high quality decisions by honestly dealing with what I imagine, what I imagine, it's what I know to be one of the most like difficult data spaces I think to operate in as a professional, right? Just the amount of information that any clinician has to navigate, understand, ingest, and then leverage to make high quality decisions. I think we've like kind of reached the limits of human cognitive capabilities, is my view. And so the tools that we build need to help the clinicians kind of make sense of that data space to actually drive better decision making and interactions with the patient. Um, that's the that's the vision, and that's like the target that Navin and I are skating towards. So Cheryl, without reading that actual request from the NIH and how they define AI doctors, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with the aim there. Um, but could be wrong, or maybe the definition there is a bit different than how I interpret it. Naveen, anything on AI doctors that you want to add?
Yeah, I need to. I was trying to look for the notice, but I'm happy to talk more, Cheryl, like later about this. Seems like something interesting. We definitely have a part to play in the development of these tools. But yeah, broadly, our goal is not to replace, but to augment, right? In fact, there's like a recent article Pai and I were talking about on how, especially with diagnostic specialties, like radiology, pathology, it's making doctors' lives much easier. I mean, obviously creating different kinds of new opportunities, but it's not at this point replacing anyone. So I can skip to Nabil's clarifying question. So I think hang on. So
I thought
it's
we answered that one already. It was the modality is not the source of.
oh okay. I think it was clarifying like what sources. Oh right. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, we got another one. For the data you're working on, when it's finished, will this be available to physician researchers to use and analyze? The answer there is it depends. Within an institution, when you deploy NimbleMine, the kind of construct that houses and maintains the data is called a data room. Um, Anyone can theoretically have access to that data room, but it is incumbent upon the administrator of the NimbleMind deployment. So think like maybe a department head or the chief data officer who kind of runs the super administrator account to determine who has access to that data room. So what we're basically building and aligning towards are the internal controls that an institution has for how data is accessed and shared. So can NimbleMind make their data available to physician researchers? Absolutely. We're not the one making that decision, though. We're leaving it in the hands of either the administrators or security leads or whatever process exists within that organization to share clinical data with participants within the institution. We leave it to them to decide. Okay. Another question. In case of dementia, how would you convert continuous and patient-generated streams like speech snippets, gait metrics, wearable vital data into validated biomarkers that give clinicians a real-time view of disease progression? And what validation milestones would you want to reach before embedding those in routine clinical? Naveen, you want to say that?
Yeah. So this is in line with like a lot of the other questions, right? So yeah. Um, they would be individual agents that do these processes. So essentially, when speech snippets, like let's take the speech snippets example, right? If you have a bunch of audio data that comes in, the agent will recognize it as that, and then two things like either transcribe and then extract features, or maybe use the audio itself in a CNN. So there's two ways it can be done. It depends on how what's most useful, and like stuff like wearable data, we have actually integrations with Fitbit that bring the data directly into our servers. So all of these things can be easily done. It's more around, I would say, not the data itself, but it's largely an integration problem, like bringing the data into the system. But currently, most, I would say, speech snippet, gate metric. In fact, yeah, I think all of these three things that are mentioned, speech snippets, gate metrics, and wearable vital data, all of these can easily be integrated into our system. And the second question, I mean, the second part is, and what validation milestones would you want to reach before embedding those in routine clinical care? Um, I would say the second question is not really okay. So it's two parts, right? One is yes, we do provide like performance metrics that can be used by senior clinical leadership to embed this in care, but it's not our specific role to embed these things in care as of yet. So, for example, if we bring in data like speech snippets to predict, I say, cognitive decline progression, we would feedback these accuracy metrics to the clinicians if we do build a model, and they would then make the decision whether to integrate that into routine clinical care, and we would provide the support needed on the platform rather than us making a decision per se. So I would say we would be decision partners in terms of embedding AI products into routine clinical care, but we don't make the sole decision, and it shouldn't be that way. Any further
Excellent.
questions from anyone? Thank you, and like yeah, these were very insightful and yeah, useful questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see any more popping up for Q&A. Again, if you haven't taken down our email and want to reach out, please feel free to do so. On our site, there's a request to kind of get in touch and join our beta list. I look at every single one of those emails that come through. So if you want to get in touch with us through the website, that's always available to you. And thanks again for hosting us. Hopefully this was useful and beneficial to the folks on the call and folks at the AITC. So thanks again.
Thank you guys both.
Take
So,
care. Have a good day.
have a good day,
Bye.
everyone.